We are going to run the country. President Trump on what happens next after a stunning overnight military operation.
U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed the U.S. has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. has, quote, captured Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro and his wife.
In the early hours of the morning, while much of the Western Hemisphere slept, a sequence of events unfolded that immediately altered diplomatic calculations far beyond one country's borders. According to official statements released within hours, U.S. military operations were conducted in and around Venezuela's capital. The timing, the method of announcement, and the absence of prior public diplomatic signaling caused governments across the region to reassess assumptions they had held for decades about predictability, process, and restraint in hemispheric affairs. What followed was not simply a military incident, but a moment that exposed how deeply trust, rather than force, underpins modern international influence. According to reports from regional media and international monitoring organizations, activity was detected in Caracas shortly before dawn. Residents reported aircraft movement, limited explosions, and temporary disruptions to infrastructure. Shortly afterward, U.S. officials confirmed that an operation had taken place and that Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro had been removed from the country. The announcement, delivered through social media and brief official remarks, provided limited details regarding legal authority, operational scope, or subsequent diplomatic steps. International observers noted that the speed of events left little time for verification or multilateral consultation. For years, U.S. policy toward Venezuela had been characterized by sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and public condemnation of governance practices. Most analysts expected continued economic and political isolation rather than direct military action. According to statements from several foreign ministries, the shift from pressure to force occurred without the gradual escalation typically associated with major international interventions. This abrupt transition introduced uncertainty not only about Venezuela's immediate future, but about the consistency of decision-making in Washington itself. Within hours, reactions emerged across the hemisphere and beyond. Governments in Latin America called for clarity, restraint, and adherence to international law. European officials stated they were seeking confirmation of facts and legal justification. Multilateral organizations requested information regarding the status of Venezuela's leadership and civilian safety. At the same time, aviation authorities imposed restrictions over Venezuelan airspace, and energy and shipping firms began reviewing exposure risks. Markets responded cautiously, reflecting concern not about one country, but about the reliability of established diplomatic norms. While attention focused on Caracas, a quieter shift was taking place elsewhere. Canada, according to diplomatic observers, did not issue immediate statements beyond calls for stability and legal process. This measured response stood in contrast to the rapid escalation of rhetoric elsewhere. Canadian officials emphasized continuity of policy, parliamentary oversight, and multilateral engagement. For many regional governments, this contrast highlighted a broader question that extended beyond Venezuela: how predictability itself has become a strategic asset. For decades, the Western Hemisphere operated on an assumption that major powers, regardless of disagreements, would follow recognizable procedures. Military action, when it occurred, was typically preceded by extended diplomatic efforts, legislative authorization, and alliance coordination. These processes did not eliminate conflict, but they provided governments and markets with time to adapt. According to several international relations scholars, the erosion of these patterns introduces costs that are not immediately visible, but accumulate over time. Trust in international relations is not abstract. It shapes trade agreements, investment decisions, security partnerships, and crisis management. When governments believe that policy shifts will be announced through established channels, they can plan accordingly. When actions appear sudden or opaque, uncertainty becomes the dominant factor. According to reports from global risk assessment firms, uncertainty increases borrowing costs, delays infrastructure projects, and encourages diversification away from perceived instability. In the case of Venezuela, the immediate focus was political and humanitarian. However, the secondary effects were strategic. Countries across the Caribbean and Latin America began reassessing their reliance on any single external power. Energy exporters reviewed transit routes.
Import-dependent nations examined food and fuel security. Financial institutions recalculated exposure to sanctions and counter-sanctions. These reactions did not require public declarations. They were reflected quietly in policy reviews and internal memoranda. Canada's position during this period attracted attention not because of assertive action, but because of consistency.
Canadian foreign policy, according to official doctrine, prioritizes legal frameworks, alliance coordination, and incremental change. While this approach rarely produces dramatic headlines, it offers partners a sense of continuity. In an environment where unpredictability carries tangible costs, predictability itself becomes influence. According to data from international trade organizations, countries increasingly diversify partnerships following periods of diplomatic volatility. This diversification does not signal hostility, it signals risk management. Governments seek relationships that minimize sudden disruption. Analysts note that states perceived as stable and process-driven often gain quiet advantages during such transitions, attracting investment, cooperation, and diplomatic engagement without overt competition. The situation in Venezuela also raised legal questions that extended beyond the region. International law scholars cited unresolved issues regarding sovereignty, jurisdiction, and enforcement. While some actions may be justified under domestic legal frameworks, their international interpretation remains contested. These debates are not merely academic. They influence how future actions are received, supported, or resisted by the international community. As days passed, the absence of immediate resolution in Venezuela reinforced a broader lesson. Power alone does not guarantee outcomes. Stability, legitimacy, and trust shape whether actions lead to long-term influence or prolonged uncertainty. According to historical analysis, periods of rapid intervention often produce short-term control but long-term instability, particularly when institutional frameworks are weakened. Canada's approach, during the same period, continued to emphasize dialogue, humanitarian assistance, and coordination with international partners. Officials avoided speculation and refrained from unilateral declarations. This restraint, according to diplomatic analysts, signaled reliability rather than passivity. In global politics, reliability determines who is consulted, who mediates, and who shapes post-crisis arrangements. The broader implication of the events surrounding Venezuela is not about one leader or one administration. It reflects a structural shift in how influence is accumulated and lost.